Genesis chapter 8, verse number 1 has a very interesting verse. It tells us the waters assuaged. During the flood, all sorts of things were formed. The natural gas was formed. The coal formation would have come in during the flood and because of the flood. Down near the South Pole, it's interesting. If you read, you look at National Geographic map of the South Pole, it says they found anthracite coal near the South Pole. And leaves and all sorts of things found. Well, there's no plants growing on Antarctica, so how do you get coal at the South Pole? One explanation is the South Pole used to be up near the equator. I think that's a lousy explanation, but that's the one that's in the textbooks. The other explanation is the whole Earth used to have a more tropical paradise. Stuff lived everywhere. And the continents today is a pure coincidence based upon the water level. If you raise or lower the water, everything changes. And what it was like before the flood, there's absolutely no way to tell, as far as I can figure out. Garden of Eden could have been right here in Pensacola, Florida. Right now it might be under 500 feet of mud. Some people have argued, oh, well, the river Euphrates is mentioned in the Bible as being in the Garden of Eden. That's true. And the river Euphrates is in Baghdad. Well, this river Euphrates is. It doesn't mean it's the same thing. People got off the ark and they probably said, wow, that looks like that river we had before the flood. And they named it the same thing. Just like people came from York and named it New York when they got over here, and New Hampshire and all those kind of things. I was in up near Moscow, Idaho. Well, it's not the same as Moscow, Russia. It just has the same name, that's all. So, after, excuse me. In Genesis chapter 8, verse 1, it tells us, God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. Now, many new versions of the Bible have changed this, and I think have messed it up. They say the water receded. Well, this word assuage means to drop down or to sink down, to subside. This is the word used when someone's anger is assuaged. It drops down. It doesn't move away, it just drops down. It's very different. The water assuaged, meaning the water just began to drop down. I suspect what happened is parts of the crust of the earth sank down, sucking the water into the low place. Other places would lift up, forming mountain ranges. If you look at Genesis chapter 8, verse 2, it says, the waters returned from off the earth continually. And after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. There are several different stages to the flood. The 40 days of rain, 150 days of the water having dominion or power over the earth, and then 150 days of going down. That's 5 months. So, parts of the earth's crust were probably exposed off and on during this year-long flood. Noah was in the ark for a year. The flood didn't necessarily last a year, but Noah stayed in the ark for 1 year. He got in 7 days before it started, and about 13 months total he was actually in the ark. So probably sections of the earth's crust were not inundated, not underwater the whole time. The crust would be bouncing around, floating up and down. Sometimes you might even get a section that would come up and totally dry out for a few months, and maybe even get wind-blown sandstone formed. There's sand, when it blows and drifts like sand dunes, it makes layers. Sometimes there are petrified sand dunes inside layers of sedimentary rock. You have rock, and then sandstone, and then more rock. And the evolutionist says, see, this was above water. Yeah, sure was. You're right about that. Because this couldn't form underwater. Well, I disagree with that. There have been, if you fly over the beach, you'll see right down through the water, you can see the wave action makes all kinds of sedimentation in the water, out under the water. You know, a lot of sedimentation does form. So even during the flood, you may get an awful lot of underwater sedimentation of sand that will then pack and dry out. When it lifts up, it'll become above water level and turn to like a petrified sand dune, sort of. But after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. I have highlighted here the words, returned from off the earth continually. This is the Hebrew words, halak vashab, which means going and returning. This gives the indication the water was leaving and then coming back, and then leaving and coming back, sloshing back and forth. If we filled this building full of water 4 feet deep, and we picked up one end of the building, the water would slosh down to one end, but it wouldn't stay there. It would slosh back and go down and come back and go down. And depending on numerous different features, the surface of the earth, what's going on underneath, the shapes of it, how much water, et cetera, what mountains are in the way. Depending on many different features, the water would slosh around for a long time, maybe weeks or months. And there may be, during this time, the last part of a year-long flood, I suspect, is when the mountains were formed. Excuse me. If you have mountains lifting up and valleys sinking down, you would have Earth's crust movement, which may cause earthquakes, causing further tsunamis and tidal waves going back and forth. But sedimentary rock is always laid down horizontally, as in with the horizon, flat. Sedimentary rock would be laid down flat, and then as the mountains lifted up, the water would rush off. This gives it energy. The water then is going to race back and forth. The waves are going to bounce back and forth across the oceans as soon as they run into something. And that would depend on so many factors, the size of the ocean, the distance traveled, the depth of the water, how much energy is put into it. But those waves going back and forth are going to wash off the sediment layers and expose them already at twisted angles and deposit new layers on top. Now this in geology is called an unconformity, a place where the layers are crossing each other, but they obviously weren't laid down that way. Grand Canyon has a huge unconformity down at the bottom. This is a schematic of Grand Canyon, calling the angular unconformity, where the layers were washed off and then new layers deposited on top, including lava flows. The letter H there is a lava flow. Well, anytime you get the crust of the earth being broken up and shifting around, you're going to have volcanoes going off. So probably during the flood there was volcanic action. After the flood there was volcanic action. There's still volcanic action today. The lava would be flowing during this whole time from different areas. There could be a volcano erupting right now, but it doesn't affect us over here. It doesn't mean the whole world was that way. There were patches of turmoil and patches of tranquility. So underwater lava, when it comes up, it forms, it's very distinctive from lava above water. It's called pillow lava. If you ever see it, a volcano erupting under the ocean or something, it forms very distinctive layers, like pillows. They call it pillow lava. And Mount Ararat, for instance, is pillow lava. Mount Ararat formed underwater. Well, today it's 17,000 feet above water. So something was different. Here we show another schematic of the different rock layers in Grand Canyon. And of course they've got them all named. The very top one is called Kaibab. The top of the canyon is called the Kaibab Uplift.